Welcome, everyone. I'm Shirley Silva of Lotus Media, and today I'm speaking with Irene Fantopoulos, author of the debut psychological thriller, All the Evil Scatters. Welcome to the show, Irene.
Thank you, Shirley. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm thrilled to be able to talk to you today about All the Evil Scatters.
Me too. Before we delve into the book, Irene, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I'm a writer of fiction and nonfiction. I've been published in some anthologies and online and print magazines and newspapers. I've also been shortlisted for a couple of prizes in poetry and in prose. All the Evil Scatters is my first full-length novel. And I've been a writer for most of my life, ever since I was a teenager. Started with poetry, as most teenagers do. And now I'm an educator and creator of the workshop Techniques in Creative Writing.
That's great. Can you tell me a bit more about your workshop?
Absolutely. The workshop itself has 6 modules that I've created, and with various techniques to help people get their creative juices in writing started, at least, or to help people actually think about ways that they could write. Because we all think, oh, I'm going to write, I'm going to write, I'm going to write, and nobody does because of time, of other pressures that we all have. And so this will help narrow it down for them and help them with helpful techniques. And it'll help improve their writing. And, in terms of, what do I bring to the table? I've been a facilitator for many years, and I've done a lot of business writing. I'm also a social worker by background. So I have a number of areas that I can capture information from and focus it into a workshop. So I hope people will listen to this and join me. I think they'll enjoy it.
Sounds very good and thorough type of course for would-be writers. So what inspired you to write All the Evil Scatters?
Well, I guess my inspiration comes from my background in social work, and I also have an undergraduate degree in criminology. And so I'm certainly fascinated by crime and why people commit crimes, especially heinous crimes. We all um, have to look at these situations and wonder, why do people commit crimes? Why do we hurt each other? So I wanted to delve into that with this book. And also, part of it is, I'm of a Greek background, and we have a lot of superstitions, and the evil eye is one of those superstitions. So basically, I've taken elements of that concept and woven it throughout the book. So you'll see that prominently in the book.
Interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the story is about?
Sure. The story is it's a psychological thriller, I guess you would say, with some elements of horror. I mean, the content is not as palatable to some as it might be to others. So I just want to put that out there. If you're a bit squeamish, it might not work for you, but you can just skip those pages and move on, because the story itself is quite fascinating. I think you'll enjoy it. And so it takes place in the city of Toronto predominantly, and a fictional Toronto City Police Force. And there's 2 detectives hunting down their killer, and hopefully they'll catch him before he continues to commit crimes.
That does sound like quite a heavy subject matter. What was the hardest part about writing this book?
I think for me, it's how do I put it? Living inside the head of a criminal mastermind, the mind of a serial killer. And that's not easy to do, as you might imagine. So I actually had to live with him for about 3 or 4 years, and so that was the hardest part for me. And I guess the other part that was really hard was completing this project, because I I had people counting on me, my beta readers, my writing group, and friends and family. They were all pushing me to say, when are you going to publish it? So, getting myself to that point was also quite difficult to get to, but I did it.
You did, and understandable that those kind of pressures would be on you. And it's great that you had those people around you to push you. So, where does your inspiration to write come from, especially to write about a serial killer?
Well, it goes back a long, long time. I've always been fascinated with, the works of Stephen King. I read books like Helter Skelter, which is, true crime. And I also used to go to the Roxy Theater with my mom on a Friday night. And that's what we did. Oh, I think we're having some technical difficulties, but that's okay. And so mom and I used to spend Friday nights looking at horror movies with Bela Lugosi and Vincent Price. So that was a lot of the impetus for writing this book.
Wow, fascinating, fascinating upbringing. And when did you start becoming a writer, and why?
I know it sounds trite, but I've always wanted to be a writer. And I think ever since started reading when I was a young child and also into my teenagehood, I started writing poetry, as I mentioned earlier. And, then professionally, I became a business writer. So I needed to add a little bit of spice to that writing just to instill a little bit of interest to the dry, mundane business world, right?
Mhm.
Um, and also, I was an immigrant child. I came to Canada as a small child. And, when I came here, I didn't speak a word of English. So I spoke Greek, and people around me didn't speak Greek except for my family. And then we actually went through, hard times in terms of my English. But, my teachers saw something in me and they nurtured it and they helped me to understand. And reading was a way for me to write and also to be um, aware of what the English language was all about. So those are the things that made me a writer. And I would read to the kids in a circle, and we'd write reports together. So I was kind of like let loose to lead the group, and so we did that. So it was fun for me. I don't know if it was fun for those other kids. I really don't remember, but I do remember the reading circles we formed.
It's really interesting that English is your second language. And so, I mean, you grew up with all these different influences around you. It's a wonderful history that you have there. And Irene, what do you think is the best thing about being a writer?
I think for me, it's immersing myself in the world of the characters and the places and things that I have created. So I live in that world because it has to be real. So if it's real to me, it'll be real to the reader.
Right. Interesting. And I'm just curious, have you dealt with writer's block? Common thing that writers mention?
Absolutely. And for me, what that means is I'm a little bit lazy. There's always something better to do. There's something more interesting to read or something that's fascinating. And so, I need to use some of the techniques that I talked about to try and discipline myself and get writing because without discipline, like exercise, right? If we don't exercise and regularly and schedule it won't happen. I'm that kind of a person. Some people can go to the gym and carry on, and some people can write and carry on, but others, struggle. I think most of us do struggle with those things of committing to a project or something that we need to do.
Hmm. Take some internal discipline.
Absolutely.
And what are you currently working on? What's next for you?
Well, I have a few projects underway. The first one is actually it's a deviation from this current book. It's a romance. It takes place on a Greek isle, so using my Greek influence once again. The other is A Time of the Generals, and it's about a military junta in Greece in the early 1970s, and also in Toronto, and it's about two siblings. One is a woman struggling to be a photojournalist in a man's world. This is the early 70s. And the brother, he actually is grappling with his sexuality. So he joins the army in Greece and hoping to eradicate himself of, the feelings that he has around his sexuality. So that's the second one. And the third one is as a drama, and basically it takes the events of 9/11 and weaves in a relationship that has been falling apart for a long time. And the couple coincidentally wins the lottery on the day of 9/11. So
Wow.
the story follows from that.
Wow, those are all so
Mhm.
very different stories.
Yes.
Irene, I have a question from the audience here. What advice would you give to someone who wants to write a book?
Well, what works for me, and again, these are guidelines, but I think for me, there are five pillars that I use and find very helpful in terms of writing. So, one is write every day. I can't stress that enough, right? Again, it's about discipline, and just carve out an hour for yourself every day. Just put it in your book, you'll be reminded. The other is read books all the time, read different genres. You may get a spark of some nugget of interest that you get from another book, and you'll be able to deal with that. Form a writing group of like minded people. Also, join a book club. Again, you'll read books that you probably wouldn't think of reading. So that'll help formulate stories in your mind. I mean, not the exact story, obviously, but it'll be something for you to think about. And finally, keep a journal of your day. What happened during the day, your feelings, your thoughts. Did things make you angry? Were you also not happy? What were your thoughts for the day? And maybe there was nothing. So if there was nothing, say nothing. And the next day there will be something for sure. And so those are my five pillars.
Well, I love the idea of the five pillars. Thanks for sharing those tips. That's great. These are all the questions I have for you today, Irene, but perhaps you'll join us another time, maybe when your next book is published.
Absolutely.
And maybe we'll have more questions from our listeners. So I just want to thank you and everyone for joining us today. And it's been a pleasure to find out more about you. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Irene.
much, Shirley. It was a pleasure being here with you today. Thank you. I
Sure.
will definitely come back if you invite.
I will.